Why is the FAA trying to stall the 5G rollout? As I wrote in Real Clear Policy, my aviation career spanned over 25 years of flying in the worst weather conditions imaginable around the world using radar altimeters to land safely. But when debating airline safety, facts matter. And we can't let a baseless protest over aviation safety jeopardize access to crucial new 5G technology. The state of Louisiana, for example, stands to gain an estimated $4.23 billion in investment and 7,100 new jobs from the deployment of 5G wireless. In the U.S. economy as a whole, the unprecedented speed and processing power of 5G will add $1.5 trillion in GDP and 4.5 million jobs. But there are far more benefits than that. Without 5G, our ability to compete with China, both in business and national security, is going to be seriously diminished. 5G is literally going to be the basis of modern infrastructure in coming years, supporting everything from the Internet of Things to first responders and healthcare. The deployment of 5G will also help bolster efforts to enhance the electric grid as well, as utilities undertake efforts to modernize their transmission infrastructure and make improvements so that they can better accommodate increased demand and more quickly restore power after natural disasters such as Hurricane Ida. A more robust data infrastructure will be necessary to fully realize these improvements. It's essential that we employ the connectivity 5G will provide to safeguard grid resilience and make sure the lights stay on. But all these advantages are being put at risk by a Federal Aviation Administration warning that 5G deployment in what's called C-band spectrum could interfere with radar altimeter operations, making flying less safe. According to them, their complaints have already forced wireless providers to delay the scheduled 5G commercial rollout, even though there's plenty of evidence from studies and, more importantly, thousands of hours of flying experience in countries who have already implemented 5G that proves no safety issues actually exist. The FAA is not in charge of the spectrum. The Federal Communications Commission is. And the FCC has spent years studying the issue of altimeter interference, consulting with spectrum and aviation experts to make sure both technologies can occupy C-band frequencies safely, and then carefully crafting rules that fully protect the aircraft and our passengers. They've mandated a minimum 220 megahertz guard band around the section of the C-band that radar altimeters use, which is very robust and more than twice that in place in other countries. And the substantiated data gathered in those other countries is what really matters here. Studies are no substitute for data, and the ability to look at past and present altimeter and 5G operations in the real world. We know that nearly 40 countries already operate 5G in the C-band, and all without a single report of harmful interference with any type of aviation function. If a problem really existed, we would know about it by now, folks. It's clear that the FAA's concerns are based on insufficient or just plain wrong information. Even so, wireless providers have stepped up to doubly ensure safe C-band operation by voluntarily adopting precautionary measures near airports and heliports nationwide. Wireless providers will limit base station power in the middle spectrum range near public use airports with paved runways and control signal levels close to heliport takeoff and landing areas for medevac and other helicopter missions. Although there's no realistic reason for concern, providers want to make it clear anyway that everything is being done to protect public safety, especially aviation safety. According to a recent report from Boston Consulting Group, every 6 months we delay the deployment of the 5G network wipes out $25 billion in economic benefits and puts us further behind our global competitors in the race to lead on this new vital technology. We clearly can't afford any further delay. It's time for our leaders to step up and resolve this pointless bureaucratic controversy before any more damage is done. Watch Congressman Tom Massey from Kentucky lay it out and expose the FAA for poor planning in this committee hearing video.
You know, the FCC has an obligation to ensure over time that the radio spectrum is used for its highest and best use. In fact, it was Obama in 2010 who said free up some space for these telecommunications devices. And I was shocked when I dug into this to find out how much of the spectrum the aviation industry uses. And I'm wondering, you know, by 1982 standards, it might have been the highest and best use of that spectrum. But now that we've got better radio frequency modulators and an ability to use this space, by the way, no more frequencies getting manufactured. We've got all that God has given us. It's like land on the planet. So we have to be really careful with this space and use it the best way. What I was shocked to find out is that the radio altimeter, which is basically a 1980s version of Mark Twain putting a rope in the water and measuring how far down things are, uses 200 megahertz of spectrum, and it's got a 200 megahertz guard band if you're not concerned about the low power satellite spectrum, and you're actually concerned about the 5G spectrum. It's like you're sitting in an airplane seat and there's an empty seat next to you and you're complaining about the seat on the other side of the aisle is kind of the analogy here, which in 1982, I understand, which is the last time these standards came out, it all worked out. But here's how valuable this spectrum is. It was auctioned off, 280 megahertz of it was auctioned off a year ago and brought $81 billion. So to use the radio altimeters, you know, we're using 200 megahertz, which is about $300 million in megahertz. That's its commercial value. We're using about $60 billion of spectrum to figure out how far from the ground the airplane is when it gets within a couple thousand feet of the ground. It makes me wonder if we're kind of being sloppy with the spectrum usage in other aviation fields. I know that FAA administrator, I think you were involved in helping develop the ATC digital communication between the plane and the tower. You have some familiarity with that?
Yes.
And it's my understanding that all of the VHF nav for aviation fits in 10 megahertz from the 108 to 118 slot. And then we've got the audio communications that fit in 20 megahertz above that. And you all were able to use just 1 megahertz to get all of the communication, the digital communications between the ATC and the planes.
Yes, sir. So do you want me to respond? Or?
Well, if I'm wrong, just correct me, but let me go on a little bit forward. If we were going to design radio altimeters now, how much spectrum do you think we would need? Will we need the whole 200 megahertz? Could we do it, which is $60 billion worth of spectrum? Could we do it with 10 megahertz, which would be $3 billion? Or could we do it with 1 megahertz?
I can't, I'm not a spectrum expert myself, but if you're asking me whether we can use spectrum more efficiently, I think the answer is yes. But we have to have a strategy for being able to do that. And remember, when commercial aircraft are certified and put into service, they will operate safely, and we engineer them to carry the public for a period of 30 to 40 years. And so, if we are going to put that kind of retrofit mandate and standards development into avionics, that needs to be part of our national strategy. And maybe that's something that can come out of this spectrum process. But my point here is, we need to have the data of what we're designing around so we can set the standards for the avionics manufacturers and the airframe manufacturers to be able to produce those new units. And will they use spectrum more efficiently? I would say that they will.
That was the whole point of my questioning, and you completely understand it. So I want to make sure that we don't just solve this problem, but we solve the problem going forward, because we're not inventing any more spectrum. You can't create it, and we want to make sure that the aviation industry is a good steward. And I understand the changes happen faster with telecommunications than they could possibly be certified in aircraft. But I appreciate you being willing to get in front of it and look for ways to sort of be a better steward of the spectrum. Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Chairman.
you.
Thank you, Director.
The chair recognizes Representative Payne.
Of course, what you saw the congressman tease out there is that the FAA was not ready. The bureaucrats didn't have a plan together for 5G in regards to telling aircraft manufacturers and helping them plan to retrofit their aircraft if it was necessary. And now they've come up with this very tenuous, and I'm skeptical of it, safety concern. And most folks that have flown an aircraft and the experience based in these 40 countries that are already using 5G just shows that it's not real from a safety perspective. So bureaucrats, get off your butts, get your job done, and aircraft manufacturers, stop pulling their strings to try to save you some money and get with the program. You're costing all of us time and money.